What if a jewel wasn't just cursed, but alive? Sarah Martin, a journalist chasing myths, receives a cryptic letter that leads her to a decaying mansion and the chilling truth behind the legendary Hope Diamond. But the deeper she digs, the more she realizes. This isn't just a story. It's a trap. Footsteps in mirrors. Whispers in the dark. A man in black who never moves and never stops watching. The diamond doesn't want to be found. It wants to be kept. And once you touch, it keeps you. This is not just a curse. It's a possession. Some stories are warnings, whispers passed down through time, wrapped in mystery and fear. But what if one of those stories was real? What if the most cursed object in history was never truly lost? In The Curse of the Hope Diamond, we follow Sarah Martin, a curious journalist with a hunger for uncovering the truth behind myths and legends. But when an unmarked letter leads her to the long-abandoned Blackwood Manor, she stumbles into something far more terrifying than a forgotten tale. The diamond was supposed to be missing. The last known owner, Evelyn Blackwood, died under mysterious circumstances decades ago. But Evelyn left behind secrets. Mirrors that whisper, footprints that appear from nowhere, and a man in black who watches and waits. And the diamond? It wasn't stolen. It wasn't misplaced. It was sealed away for a reason. What begins as an investigation turns into a descent. As Sarah uncovers the layered horrors of the diamond's past, she begins to lose pieces of herself. Time bends. Reality distorts. And the man in black grows closer. This is a slow-burning, atmospheric horror story full of tension, mystery, and supernatural suspense. With each chapter, you'll be pulled deeper into a web of forgotten history and ancient curses. But beware, some doors, once opened, can't be closed again. The rain hadn't started yet, but the sky had turned the color of bruises, dark purples bleeding into angry grays. Sarah Martin sat by the window of her small apartment, tapping a pen against the edge of her notebook. Her coffee had long gone cold. Outside, the city moved like a tired animal. Slow, dull, going through the motions. Nothing exciting ever happened anymore. At least, not to her. She had written about haunted houses, vanishing towns, and roadside phantoms. But lately, it all felt like recycled folklore. Stories she could write with her eyes closed. She was craving something real, something that would make her heart pound again. That was when the knock came. 3 soft taps. Not the usual buzz of the mail carrier or the impatient thud of a delivery driver. Just taps. She opened the door to find no one in the hallway, just a single envelope resting on her welcome mat. Cream-colored, unmarked, no stamp, no return address. Only her name typed neatly in faded ink across the front. Sarah Martin. A chill rolled through her as she picked it up. The paper felt oddly warm, as if someone had been holding it for a long time before placing it down. She shut the door and sat back at the table, slicing the envelope open with her thumbnail. Inside, there was no letterhead, no signature, just a single piece of aged paper, the kind that crackled softly when unfolded. The handwriting was elegant, almost too neat to be real. The Hope Diamond was never lost. Find the truth in Blackwood Manor before it's too late. No explanation, no context, no warning. Beneath the words was a photograph. Old, worn at the corners, black and white. It showed a woman standing in front of an ornate glass case, a large pendant hanging on a delicate, chain inside it. The diamond was unmistakable, blue as midnight, cut like ice. Sarah stared at the photo. The woman was striking. Tall, with sharp cheekbones and piercing eyes that seemed to look right through the camera. Right through time. Her name surfaced in Sarah's mind like a memory she hadn't realized she still had. Evelyn Blackwood, the last known owner of the Hope Diamond. Her death had been the subject of endless speculation. Some said she died of a heart attack. Others swore she fell down the grand staircase of her mansion while fleeing an unseen figure. And of course, there were those who whispered she was murdered by the diamond itself. Sarah had written a short piece about it years ago. Mostly myth, nothing solid. After Evelyn's death in 1975, the diamond disappeared and the case went cold. But now, someone was reopening it. For her. She turned the photo over. A handwritten note in the same elegant script was scrawled on the back. "He's still watching. Return before the veil closes." Sarah didn't know what that meant. Not yet. But her fingers trembled as she held the photo closer, drawn in by the eyes of the woman who had dared to own the world's most cursed jewel. A flicker of doubt crossed her mind. Was it a prank? A sick joke by a fellow journalist? But no one knew how to press her buttons quite like this. And the envelope, that handwriting, the warmth. It all felt too real. She opened her laptop and typed in the location. Blackwood Manor, Virginia, the year. Screen loaded slowly, then displayed an image of a crumbling estate on the edge of a dense forest. Local records said it had been abandoned for decades. The property was still listed as privately owned, but no one had claimed it since Evelyn's death. The town around it, Graymore, had become nearly forgotten, with only a few residents and fading street signs, no tours, no access. But Sarah had never been the type to wait for permission. She sat back, heart racing. This was the kind of mystery she lived for. Unsolved, dangerous, real. The Hope Diamond, the cursed jewel that had supposedly brought death and ruin to everyone who possessed it. Now, after 50 years of silence, it was calling to her. And Sarah. Martin was ready to listen. The forest road twisted like a serpent, narrow and cracked with age. Sarah's rental car groaned in protest as it climbed the steep, leaf-covered hill. The further she drove, the more the GPS signal faltered, flickering between recalculating and no service. Birds stopped chirping. Wind whispered low through the trees, as if carrying secrets between branches. She glanced at the direction she'd printed. Thankfully, the name Blackwood Lane was barely visible on the old wooden sign, half-rotted and choked with ivy. She turned onto the path, tires crunching over dead leaves and gravel. There it was. Blackwood Manor. It loomed at the top of the hill like a shadow from another century, rising out of the mist like it had been waiting for her. The house was a giant carcass of wood and stone, sprawling with 3 visible floors and 2 wings. Gargoyles guarded the rooftop corners, their faces worn down to eerie grins by decades of rain. Windows stared out like black eyes. Most were shattered or boarded shut. Vines snaked their way up the walls like nature trying to reclaim what had been stolen. Sarah parked at the edge of the long-abandoned circular drive. A fountain sat in the center, dry and cracked. In its basin, moss grew thick over stone mermaids, their faces chipped and eyeless. She stepped out of the car, camera strapped to her shoulder, recorder in her pocket. The air smelled of damp earth and something else, something metallic, like old blood. She hesitated. No turning back now. The wooden porch creaked under her boots. The door, tall and black, bore a faded brass handle shaped like a lion's head. When she touched it, the metal felt strangely warm, like someone had just used it. She pushed. The door groaned open with a sound that echoed into nothingness. The darkness inside swallowed the daylight behind her. Sarah clicked on her flashlight and stepped over the threshold. The air changed the moment she entered. Heavy, still, as though the house had sealed her inside. Dust coated everything, thick, undisturbed for decades. The floor was marble, cracked in places and scattered with fallen leaves. A grand staircase rose at the far end of the entrance hall, its carpet faded to the color of dried blood. Crystal chandeliers hung above, webs draping from them like forgotten lace. To the right was a parlor, its walls lined with portraits of solemn-faced people. The Blackwood family, Sarah assumed. Their eyes followed her with that unnerving, painted gaze, like they knew she was trespassing. In the far left corner of the room sat an old gramophone, needle still resting on a record, as if someone had walked away mid-song. She reached out to touch it, but stopped when she noticed something strange. Footprints, faint, dusty impressions leading from the gramophone toward a narrow door beneath the stairs. They weren't hers. Her heart ticked faster. She followed the prints, each one a shade darker than the dust surrounding them. The door was smaller than the others, with a twisted iron handle. She turned it and stepped into a hallway that seemed too long for the house. The air here was colder. Her breath fogged as she walked. At the end of the hallway was a study, ornate and untouched. A desk sat in the center, papers and books strewn across it like someone had left in a hurry. A broken teacup rested beside an open journal. Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she reached for it. The handwriting matched the letter she'd received. She flipped to the most recent entry. The diamond hums at night. It knows I want to hide it. He speaks through the mirrors now. I see him even when I close my eyes. If anyone finds this, don't trust what you see. Beneath the writing, a name was scrawled. Shaky, barely legible. Evelyn. Sarah looked around. The walls were lined with mirrors, ornate, cracked, or cloaked with old sheets. She pulled one down. Her reflection stared back, pale and breathless, and then it blinked. She hadn't. Sarah stumbled back, heart pounding. The reflection stood still now, matching her movements exactly. Maybe it was the lighting, maybe the stress, but something felt off, like she had entered a place where the rules of the world no longer applied. A sound made her whip around, a slow, dragging creak from the hallway. She turned off her flashlight and held her breath. The sound continued, a shuffling, like something being dragged across wood. Then silence. Long, aching silence. She forced herself to step back into the hallway. Empty. Nothing, but on the dusty floor was a fresh footprint. Large. Bare. It hadn't been there before. Sarah backed away, her pulse thundering in her ears until her shoulder bumped something. She turned. A painting hung crooked on the wall behind her. A woman in a black dress, Evelyn, stood beside a velvet-lined case, but in this painting, the diamond was missing. Her flashlight flickered once, twice, then died. The hallway lights, long dead, sputtered to life. For just a heartbeat. Just long enough for her to see the reflection in a broken mirror at the end of the hall. A tall figure, dressed in black, standing still, watching, and then the light died again. Sarah ran. Sarah didn't stop running until she reached the main hall again. Her breath came in sharp, ragged bursts. The chandeliers above swayed gently, as if moved by a breeze she couldn't feel. Her flashlight had sputtered back to life, though it flickered now and then, like a candle struggling to stay lit in a storm. She stood still, listening. Silence. But not the peaceful kind. This was the kind of silence that hummed beneath the skin, the kind that told you something else was listening too. She lifted the camera hanging from her shoulder and hit record. If she was going to be haunted, she might as well document it. Her voice, steady despite the hammering in her chest, filled the air. Day 1 inside Blackwood Manor. Signs of paranormal activity already encountered. Footprints not matching my own. Flickering lights. Mirror anomalies. Possible visual hallucinations. Further investigation required. A lie. She didn't believe it was a hallucination. But admitting that out loud, especially on tape, felt too real. As she turned to explore the second floor, she spotted something she hadn't noticed before. A large oil painting above the staircase. It stretched nearly wall to wall, dust-cloaked, but intact. It showed Evelyn Blackwood standing at the edge of a grand ballroom, her eyes looking directly at the viewer. In her gloved hand, she held the Hope Diamond, glowing even through oil and canvas. Behind her, blurred in shadow, was a tall man in black. His face was hidden, but his presence was unmistakable. Sarah felt her stomach twist. She climbed the staircase, the carpet muffling her steps until she reached the landing. The second floor was worse than the first. The hallway stretched out in both directions like the spine of a dying animal. Long, dark, and oddly crooked. Most of the doors were wide open, revealing empty bedrooms draped in white sheets and dust. But one door, one very different door, was not. It was at the far end of the hall, tall, thick, made of aged oak and iron bands like it belonged to a castle instead of a house. Chained shut. Sarah moved closer, her flashlight beam narrowing to a sharp oval on the door's surface. The chain was rusted but solid, looped tightly through metal brackets bolted into the wood. A tarnished lock held it all in place. Unlike the rest of the house, this door didn't look forgotten. The wood was polished, unmarked by dust. The iron glinted faintly, and the lock had been oiled recently. It had been maintained, as if someone, something, wanted to keep whatever was behind it locked away, or keep everyone else out. She stepped closer. A strange warmth emanated from behind the door, radiating through the wood. She pressed her ear to it. At first, nothing, then, faintly, so faint she thought she imagined it. A whisper. Sarah. She jerked back. Her name. It had said her name. She looked around the hallway, but nothing had changed. Still, her skin prickled. Every hair on her arms stood up. That door was calling to her, and like every bad idea she'd ever chased for a story, she was going to answer. She searched the rooms nearby, looking for anything that might open the lock. Most drawers were empty or filled with moth-eaten clothes and water-damaged books. But in the piano room, a once elegant music lounge whose ceiling had partially caved in, she found a bench that squealed when she opened it. Inside, under yellowed sheet music, was an iron key. Old, heavy, with a black ribbon tied around its neck. The kind of key that belonged to a door no one was ever meant to open. She returned to the locked door, key in hand. Her fingers trembled as she slid it into the lock. Click. The chain fell slack. The air around her seemed to exhale. She pulled the chain free and slowly turned the handle. The door opened with a deep groan, revealing a narrow staircase leading upward. Not down like a basement. Up toward a place not visible from the outside. A hidden room. Dust swirled in the beam of her flashlight as she climbed, each step groaning beneath her. The air grew colder, but the strange warmth from before returned the moment she reached the top. And then she saw it. A single room, circular, dome-shaped, like a tower's crown. Velvet curtains hung heavy over tall, arched windows, blocking what little light remained. A fireplace sat cold and blackened, and in the center of the room, upon a stone pedestal, stood a glass case, empty. Her breath caught in her throat. This had to be where the Hope diamond had been kept. The pedestal was lined with red velvet. The glass was cracked slightly at one corner, as if someone had shattered it in a hurry. On the wall behind the pedestal hung a massive mirror, tall, tarnished, and framed with carved ivy. Unlike the other mirrors in the house, this one had no dust. It shone like it had just been polished. She raised her flashlight, and her blood ran cold. In the mirror, her reflection stood as expected. But it wasn't her. Not exactly. The reflection wore her clothes, had her face, but her eyes were wrong. Cold, ancient, and smiling. Then, the reflection raised its hand and pointed directly behind her. Sarah's spine stiffened. She turned. The room was empty. She turned back to the mirror, but the reflection was already turning its back, disappearing into shadow. Then the door slammed, shut behind her. She ran to it, pulling on the handle. Locked. She was trapped. The fireplace flared to life without warning, casting flickering orange light across the room. Shadows danced along the walls, and one of them moved with purpose. A tall figure, slender, wearing black. Sarah backed toward the pedestal, heart in her throat. She lifted her camera and started recording. The mirror shimmered. Smoke began curling. From its edges, thick and gray, like fog rolling through the glass. Then, a voice. "You've opened what should remain sealed." It didn't echo from the walls. It came from the mirror. Sarah stood frozen, the edges of her mind fraying like worn thread. The room flickered with firelight, casting long, impossible shadows that twisted and twirled across the velvet drapes and stone floor. The pedestal behind her felt like a grave. Marker now. Empty. Waiting. As if it were daring her to ask, "Where is it?" But her attention was locked on the mirror. Smoke continued to curl from its corners, tendrils of it moving as if alive, coiling around the gold-trimmed frame. The glass shimmered like water, and for a moment she wasn't sure if it was still a mirror or a window. The voice came again. "You opened the door. Now you must listen." It wasn't loud, it didn't shout or growl, but it reverberated deep in her bones, like a hum through stone. It was soft, patient, and terribly old. Sarah swallowed hard, her camera still recording but her grip weakening. She stared into the mirror, unsure whether to speak. The glass rippled, and then she saw her. Evelyn Blackwood, or rather, what was left of her. She stood within the mirror's depths, her figure flickering like a candle flame. Her once elegant black dress hung in tatters, soaked at the hem with something dark. Her hair fell around her shoulders in tangles, but her face was unmistakable. Pale, hollow-eyed, and beautiful in a way that no longer belonged to the living. Her mouth did not move, but her voice filled the room again. He watches, through reflections. He was once a man, but now he is only the curse. Sarah's mouth finally opened, voice hoarse. "Who are you?" The image stepped forward, but the mirror's surface remained undisturbed, like a pane of ice. "I was Evelyn. I took what should not have been taken. I wore it. I showed it to the world. I fed the hunger of the diamond." Sarah's chest tightened. The Hope Diamond? The air thickened and the fireplace flared brighter. It is not a jewel. It is a trap. A prison forged in beauty. Every owner believes they possess it, but it is the diamond that possesses them. Evelyn's hands lifted, trembling. "I tried to bury it, lock it away, but the curse is patient. It finds the greedy, the curious, and it makes them listen." Sarah stepped closer to the mirror, her reflection now replaced entirely by Evelyn's figure. "What does it want from me?" The glass suddenly cracked, a thin, jagged line racing across its surface like a lightning bolt. Sarah jumped back. "He knows your name, Sarah Martin." The way Evelyn spoke it? Flat, final, as if it had already been written on a gravestone. "You opened the door. You woke him." Sarah's heartbeat thundered in her ears. "The man in black? Is he real?" Evelyn's image began to fade, dissolving into smoke. "He is not a ghost, not a man. He is what the diamond leaves behind when it feeds." The fire blew out. The room was plunged into darkness. For a moment, there was only the sound of Sarah's breath, shaky, shallow as she fumbled with her flashlight. Then, footsteps. Oft, deliberate, approaching from behind the door. She backed into the pedestal, nearly knocking it over. Her flashlight flickered, buzzed, then turned on. There, in the mirror, him. A tall figure in a black coat, wide-brimmed hat casting his face in shadows. He stood directly behind her reflection, but when she spun around, no one was there. She turned back to the mirror, and he was closer. Her breath hitched. She moved to the door, gripping the handle, praying it would open now. She twisted, pulled. It refused to budge. A whisper slid through the air, brushing her ear. "Return it." She snapped her head toward the mirror. Evelyn was gone. The man in black remained. He raised his gloved hand and slowly pointed downward. Sarah followed the gesture, shining her flashlight across the floor. The stone tiles were uneven, and in the center, directly beneath the pedestal, she saw something strange. A crack. No, not a crack. A seam. She dropped to her knees and ran her fingers along it. The seam outlined a small square, just big enough to be a hidden compartment. She pried at the edges. Dust rained from the ceiling as she pulled. Her fingers slipped. Then, click, the tile shifted, rising ever so slightly. She lifted it. Inside was a wooden box, wrapped in faded black silk. Her fingers trembled as she pulled it free. The box was heavier than it looked. She hesitated, heart pounding in her throat, then lifted the lid. And there it was. Nestled in dark velvet like it was sleeping. The Hope Diamond. It pulsed softly in the light, unnaturally blue. More vibrant than any gem had a right to be. Sarah stared at it, unable to move. And then the mirror shattered. Not in a violent crash, but in a slow, deliberate web of fractures spreading outward like frost. The man in black dissolved into darkness. The reflection of the room vanished with him, and behind her the door creaked open. Sarah clutched the diamond, in one hand, the box in the other, and ran. Down the tower stairs, through the hallway, past the broken painting and the whispering shadows. The house groaned and shifted around her like a thing waking from sleep. As she reached the front door, she looked back once. Just once. At the top of the stairs, barely visible in the dark, he stood, hat low, still, watching. The night had thickened. By the time Sarah burst out of Blackwood Manor, the air outside hit her like a slap, wet, cold, and sharp with the scent of storm-soaked earth. The sky above was the color of ash, and a heavy fog had rolled in from the trees, swallowing the path she had driven in on. The world was silent. Not peaceful. Dead. She didn't look back. She couldn't. The Hope diamond was in her bag, sealed in the box, pressing against her side like a hot coal. Every step she took down the weed-choked driveway felt heavier, like something was pulling on her. Not physically, but mentally, spiritually, like an anchor tied to her soul. She fumbled for her keys, hands trembling so badly she dropped them, once, then twice. When she finally jammed them into the car door and yanked it open, she collapsed into the seat and locked every door. Only then did she allow herself to breathe. Head against the steering wheel, eyes shut, heart galloping. What did I just see? What did I bring with me? The engine coughed before it roared to life. The headlights pierced the fog, but only barely. She threw the car into reverse and peeled down the path, gravel and mud spraying beneath her tires. But at the edge of the property, just where the trees gathered like sentinels, she saw him, standing in the middle of the road. Tall, still, the man in black. Sarah slammed on the brakes. The car skidded slightly, tires shrieking. Her headlights caught his form in full, long coat flowing slightly in the wind, hat low over his face. No movement, not even a flinch. She stared, heart hammering. His face was hidden in shadow, but not from the hat, not entirely. It was something else, as if light refused to touch him. He was more silhouette than man. Then, without a sound, he took one step forward. Sarah floored the gas pedal. The car lunged forward, but the moment her headlights swept across the road again, he was gone. Not moved. Gone. She didn't stop to question it. She drove, eyes wide, hands gripping the wheel like it was the only thing tethering her to reality. Trees blurred past. The road twisted endlessly. Time felt strange. Stretched. Elastic. When she finally reached her motel on the outskirts of Graymore, it was well past midnight. Inside, she double-locked the door and shoved a chair under the knob. The diamond, still sealed in its velvet box, sat on the dresser like a sleeping serpent. She stared at it from across the room, arms wrapped around her knees on the bed. Her phone buzzed. No caller ID. She didn't answer. It rang again, and again. The third time, she picked up, against all sense, against the screaming voice in her head. Hello? Static, then. A whisper. You can't keep it. She hung up and yanked the battery out of the phone. The camera was next. She opened the footage from earlier, everything she'd recorded inside the manor. But as she clicked through the files, a horrifying pattern emerged. In every shot, he was there, the man in black, standing behind her in reflections, lurking at the far end of the hallways she hadn't noticed, watching. In one frame, he was only inches behind her, his hand reaching out, and she hadn't felt it. Her stomach turned. She slammed the laptop shut and shoved it off the bed. The screen cracked against the floor. Sleep never came. When the sun finally rose, weak and colorless, Sarah stood in front of the mirror in the bathroom, staring at her own eyes. They looked different. Not evil, not haunted. Just older. She splashed cold water on her face, then looked again. And for just a breath of a second, he stood behind her in the mirror. She spun. No one. Her reflection returned, but she knew now that mirrors could lie. Later that day, she visited a local historian, Professor Harold Whitmore, a man well into his 70s, with shaking hands and more knowledge than anyone had a right to carry. When Sarah showed him the diamond sealed inside the velvet box, his skin went pale. He didn't touch it. He didn't speak for a long time. Then, with eyes sunken and voice cracked with age, he said, "You should not have taken this. Not from there." Sarah leaned in. "What is it? What is he?" Professor Whitmore sat down heavily in the creaking chair of his dusty office. "The Hope Diamond is not merely cursed, it is alive. It feeds. It consumes those who hold it. Not always with death, but with obsession, madness, disappearance. Every owner falls. And when they do..." "He rises," Sarah frowned. "He... the man in black?" The old professor nodded slowly. "He was once the first, the diamond's original keeper, a man who tried to destroy it. It turned him into its guardian, bound him to it for eternity. Now he follows the diamond wherever it goes, watches, ensures it never stays in the wrong hands too long." "Then why hasn't he taken it from me?" she whispered. Whitmore's eyes met hers, and in them was fear. "He's waiting, because he doesn't need to take it. You'll give it to him, eventually." That night, Sarah sat in her motel room, the diamond glowing faintly from within the box. She had tried to leave it in the professor's care, but he refused, locked his doors, wouldn't even look at it again. Now the air felt heavier. She could feel him watching, even without looking, from windows, from mirrors, from the dark spaces, between shadows. She whispered aloud, to no one, "What do you want from me?" And the mirror across the room fogged over. A single word appeared. "Return." Sarah didn't remember falling asleep, only the moment she woke up. Gasping, drenched in, sweat with the taste of metal in her mouth. Her sheets were twisted around her legs like restraints, and her motel room was filled with the heavy quiet of early dawn. The digital clock beside her read 4:44 a.m., its glow cold and green. That number had shown up in her dreams. In the mirror, on the grandfather clock inside Blackwood Manor. 3 digits, repeating, inescapable. She sat up slowly, scanning the room. Everything looked the same, but it felt different. Heavier, like the air had thickened in the night. The silence wasn't empty. It was crowded. The box still sat on the dresser, unopened, but it was humming, not audibly, not to the ear, but in her chest, like a vibration that pressed against her lungs and bones, as if the diamond was alive again, and it knew it was being watched. She wanted to leave, drive to the coast, hop on a plane, bury it in the ocean, maybe, or drop it into a volcano. But no matter how far she tried to imagine running, she kept seeing the same thing, him, waiting, always waiting. She had brought the curse with her, and it wasn't going to be left behind. Later that morning, Sarah tried again to research the Hope Diamond's history, but every article she opened online glitched out. The text would load, then erase itself. Photos vanished from search engines. Names were replaced with black boxes or symbols she didn't recognize. Her Wi-Fi cut out completely. She grabbed one of her old notebooks, the one she'd used while writing an earlier article on cursed relics, and flipped to the section on the Hope Diamond. The pages were blank. She didn't remember erasing them. But the ink was gone. Something, or someone, was wiping the trail clean. The next few days passed like a fever dream. Sarah saw him everywhere, in reflections, in windows, in car mirrors, in puddles, never moving, never blinking, always standing still, like a monument, erected to watch her fall. Once she saw him standing inside a department store across the street from her motel, just behind the mannequins. Another time, his silhouette appeared in the mirrored glass of a coffee shop. He was standing beside her, though no one else could see him. At night, he stood at the foot of her bed, motionless in the moonlight. She stopped sleeping. The townspeople had begun to notice her. Whispers followed her down sidewalks. Shop doors stayed locked when she passed by. One elderly woman crossed herself when Sarah made eye contact and muttered something under her breath. Something in a language Sarah didn't recognize. Finally, a man in a convenience store pulled her aside, eyes wild and red-rimmed. "You're marked," he said, voice trembling. Sarah blinked. Marked how? The diamond leaves a trace on those who touch it. Like a beacon. It knows you now. He knows. "You?" she stared. "Then how do I get rid of it?" The man laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "You don't. The curse isn't something you carry. It's something that carries you." Desperate, she called Professor Whitmore again. His assistant answered. Her voice was strained, uncertain. "I'm sorry, he's gone." Sarah's stomach dropped. "What do you mean, gone?" "He disappeared last night. His office was torn apart, books everywhere. His desk was split open like something ripped it from the inside, and..." She hesitated. "He left a note. Just one word. Run." Sarah hung up. The curse wasn't spreading. It was waking up. That night, as a storm gathered above Graymore, Sarah sat alone in her motel room, staring at the velvet box. Lightning flashed outside. The power cut out just after midnight. In the dark, the box seemed to pulse faintly, as if it had a heartbeat. She reached out slowly and opened it. There it was. The Hope Diamond. It glowed in the darkness like a piece of frozen starlight. Beautiful. Terrible. Hypnotic. It no longer looked like a gem. It looked like an eye. Unblinking. Watching her just as much as she was watching it. And in its surface, she saw a reflection. Not hers. His. Standing directly behind her. Sarah turned, but the room was empty. When she looked back, the diamond had changed. A crack had formed across its surface, hairline thin, almost imperceptible. But it was growing. She could feel it. The curse was no longer just haunting her. It was becoming her. She began recording voice memos, fearing she might forget what was real and what wasn't. One of them, played back distorted the next day. Her own voice said something she didn't remember recording. "He doesn't want the diamond. He wants the keeper." Another recording ended with static, then a whisper in a voice that wasn't hers. "Return it, before it becomes you." On the fourth day, Sarah looked in the mirror and didn't recognize her own eyes. They were darker, not just tired, different, like someone else was looking out from behind them. That was the day she decided. She had to go back, to Blackwood Manor, to return the diamond, to bury it, seal it, burn it if she had to. Anything to end this before she lost herself entirely. As she packed her things, thunder rumbled in the distance, and a single note slid from her journal. She hadn't written it. It read, "Some doors don't close once opened." There was no signature, just a faint blue fingerprint beside the message. The rain came down in a steady sheet as Sarah drove the winding forest road back to Blackwood Manor, the windshield wipers beating like a war drum. Fog crept across the asphalt in long, reaching fingers, and the trees leaned inward as if they were listening. Her headlights barely cut through the gloom. Every mile deeper into Graymore felt like descending into a dream she'd had too many times, and never wanted to have again. The box sat beside her on the passenger seat. She hadn't opened it again. Didn't need to. The hope. Diamond called to her even through the velvet and wood, its weight undeniable, its presence filling the car like a second heartbeat. She hadn't slept in 2 days. Her eyes were sunken, her voice hoarse from speaking to no one. Somewhere along the way, she'd stopped being afraid of the man in black. She was afraid of herself. Because lately, in mirrors and reflections, she didn't always see him. Sometimes she was him. Blackwood Manor appeared at the crest of the hill just as lightning tore across the sky. For a moment, the house was outlined in stark white. Every broken shutter, every weeping gargoyle, every shadowed window staring back at her like hollow eyes. It looked worse than before. The roof had caved in one of the wings. Ivy had completely overtaken the southern wall. The air around the property shimmered strangely like heat over pavement, even in the cold. As she pulled up the driveway, her engine sputtered, then died. Dead silence. She didn't bother trying again. The diamond wanted her on foot, wanted her to walk back through that threshold. She took the box and stepped into the storm. The front door opened with barely a push, groaning like it remembered her. The interior had changed, subtly but definitely. The dust was disturbed in strange, swirling patterns. The portraits on the wall now showed faces turned toward her instead of straight ahead. One painting, Evelyn's, was missing entirely. Only the ghost of its frame remained. The fireplace in the study was lit. She hadn't touched it. Still, flames danced inside like they'd been waiting for her return. The house knew she was here. She made her way upstairs, retracing every step she had taken before. Each creak of the floorboard felt louder. The deeper she moved into the manor, the more distorted her surroundings became. Walls stretched unnaturally long. Doorways leaned. Some rooms she passed twice, as if the house was circling her in on itself. But finally, she reached the locked door at the end of the second-floor hallway. It was open, waiting. The chain that had once sealed it hung loose from a hook on the floor, rusted and broken. She climbed the stairs to the hidden tower room, every step slower than the last. Her breathing was shallow, like she was rising into thinner air. When she reached the top, the velvet-draped windows shivered. The fireplace was dark now. The broken mirror was still there, but the cracks had healed. It reflected her perfectly, too. Perfectly. No flicker, no delay. Just her, and yet not her. The woman in the mirror stood still when she moved. Then she smiled. It wasn't her. Sarah stepped into the center of the room and laid the box on the pedestal. Her fingers hovered over it. The voice returned. Low. Velvet smooth, neither male nor female. Something older. It belongs here. But so do you. She opened the box. The hope diamond glittered, brighter than ever. So bright it hurt to look at, like staring into a star. The crack across its surface had vanished. It was whole again. Hungry. The mirror behind her pulsed, then rippled. The man in black stepped through. No longer just a reflection. He was here, tall, towering. His coat whispered across the floor. His face was still shrouded, but Sarah could feel his eyes on her, inside her, like he was peeling her apart piece by piece, searching for something. She should have been terrified. Instead, she whispered, "What are you?" The man in black stopped across from her. The fire reignited without warning. Flames burst high, casting shadows that danced like hands. And then he spoke. The Keeper. His voice was not human. It was layered, like multiple voices echoing at once. Familiar, ancient, and one of them was hers. She looked into his shadowed face, and she understood. He wasn't a person. Not anymore. He was a collection, an echo, a shell filled with every voice that had ever possessed the Hope Diamond, every soul bound to it, every owner who refused to let go. He was Evelyn. He was the first priest, the fallen thief, the cursed queen. And now he was becoming her, unless she broke the chain. Tears welled in her eyes as she reached for the diamond. "Don't put it back," a voice inside her whispered. "Bury it. Destroy it." But another voice, colder, answered, "You are already part of it." Her fingers touched the gem, and everything stopped. Time folded. The room vanished. She was standing in a ballroom now, beautiful, intact, filled with music and candlelight. People danced, laughed. The chandeliers above sparkled. And at the top of the staircase, wearing a sapphire blue dress, stood Evelyn. She looked radiant. Alive. Sarah watched as Evelyn descended the steps, holding the diamond high in the air like a trophy. And then, chaos. The lights shattered. People screamed. Blood bloomed across marble floors like spilled wine, and standing at the center of it all was him, the first keeper, the man in black, face hidden, arms outstretched, and then silence. Sarah blinked, back in the tower room, breathless, shaking, the diamond still in her hand. But something had changed. The man in black was gone. So was the mirror, just ash where it once stood. The house no longer groaned. It was quiet, empty, waiting. Sarah placed the diamond back inside the box and sealed it. She whispered into the silence, "Let this end with me." And for the first time since she entered Blackwood Manor, the house felt still. The sun was rising as Sarah stepped outside Blackwood Manor, but the light felt different, paler, like it had passed through smoke to reach her. The sky was streaked with dull orange and the soft gray of fading night. Behind her, the house stood still, the silence so complete it rang in her ears. She didn't look back. The box, now cold and silent, was clutched to her chest. The Hope Diamond was inside, wrapped, contained, but not destroyed. Because deep down, she knew, you couldn't destroy something that wasn't born. The curse wasn't a thing. It was a thought, a hunger, a shadow that lived just outside the edges of understanding. And it remembered Sarah left Graymore the same day. She didn't say goodbye. She didn't tell anyone what had happened inside that house. Who would believe her? The footage on her camera was corrupted. The files on her laptop were gone. Even her voice memos had twisted into static. Only the box remained, and she kept it hidden. Beneath floorboards, under concrete, inside a steel vault in a location she told no one about. But the feeling never left her. Not entirely. Weeks passed. Then months. Sarah tried to reclaim her life, moved to a new city, changed her phone number, stopped writing completely. The woman who once chased stories about ghosts and myths now avoided even mirrors. Because sometimes she still saw him. Not directly, but in her periphery. The shape in a shop window that vanished when she turned. The figure reflected in car mirrors just before she blinked. The tall man standing still in the background of strangers' photos. Once, on the subway, She looked up at the security camera feed overhead, and there he was, in the seat right behind her. Her dreams turned darker. She wandered endless hallways, saw the diamond lying in the dirt, heard Evelyn's voice whispering over and over again. Some doors don't close. She woke one night to find a single crack running across her bedroom mirror, and though she lived on the 7th floor, there were footprints on her balcony. Bare. Wet. Heavy. The box remains sealed. She tells herself it's safe. That the curse ended the day she returned it. But every so often, she swears she can hear a hum, not in her ears, but in her bones, like a faint vibration in the walls, in the floorboards, in her own heartbeat. And when she touches the place where the box lies hidden, deep underground, it's warm. Epilogue. They say the Hope Diamond is cursed, that every owner meets a tragic end, that it's best left lost. But legends have a way of surviving. They grow teeth, and sometimes they walk beside you, watching, waiting. Because some stories never really end. They just change keepers. If you love dark mysteries, haunted objects, and supernatural suspense that leaves your skin crawling and your mind racing, don't miss this story. Hit play, subscribe for more chilling tales, and share this with someone who loves the thrill of the unknown. Let the curse unfold, if you dare.